Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's discussion on accessibility and inclusion in STEM. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amanda Zurek, and I will be one of the moderators for this discussion. I'm 23. I'm originally from Illinois, but I moved out to Montana to go to college, where I studied cell biology and neuroscience, and graduated with my bachelor's in November of last year. And now I work at a pharmaceutical product development company, kind of close to home, back in now Wisconsin. And I've been there for about 6 months now. I started with MDA years ago as a camper when I was probably 4 or 5, and have been with them through numerous walks, Shamrock Ambassador, and just different talks. I'd now like to introduce you to my co-moderator, Justin Moy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Moy. I am 20 years old and I live in Massachusetts currently. I've been involved with the Muscular Dystrophy Association for a very long time. I went to camp, and I served as National Ambassador from 2018 to 2019. Currently, I am a rising senior at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, or WPI. I am really excited today to have 5 diverse STEM experts from General Motors here who will be sharing their unique experiences and insights as it relates to accessibility and inclusion in STEM. Thank you so much for joining us. Christy, if you would like to start off, introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, your favorite car, and then pass it on to another one of the panelists.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Amanda. Hello, everyone. I'm Christy Rasbach. I'm the Chief Engineer of Autonomous Vehicles from General Motors. I've been with GM for over 25 years. It's the only place I've ever worked. It's a great place to work. If I had to pick my favorite car right now, of course, it would be the vehicle that I'm working on. I'll get to talk more about it, I think, as part of this panel, but it's the Autonomous Cruise AV. So thanks for having me.
Matthew, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. My name is Matthew Titsworth. I am an artificial intelligence and machine learning scientist and scientist manager for General Motors. My background is that I have a PhD in mathematical physics. I am a white non-binary person wearing glasses, and my favorite car is the 1973 Corvette Stingray.
Okay. Joseph, if you'd like to introduce yourself next.
Sure. My name's Joseph Bilderbeck. I am in the after sales engineering group at GM. I am also the community outreach and pillar lead for our GM Able employee resource group. We support people within the disabilities community, both at GM and in the community at large. I would have to say my favorite is not a car, it's my 2019 Silverado that I just bought. So.
And Veronica, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Justin, and thank you to both you and Amanda for hosting. My name is Veronica Mitchell, and I work for General Motors in our Electric Vehicle Center of Expertise. And I am a brand integration and business planning manager. But basically what that is I look at all the information that comes in about, how can we make customers comfortable transitioning into electric vehicles, and then also serve as the chief of staff for our vice president over the area. My undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering, and I have an MBA. And I would say, similar to Christy, my favorite vehicle happens to be the one that I most recently worked upon, and that would be the new Hummer truck that's out.
Thank you. Also, Mr. Amrit Mehta will also be joining us today as well. He is the Global Executive Director for Enterprise Customer Experience, and we are also happy to have him as well. Oh, Amrit, if you would like to introduce yourself. Thank you for being able to make it with us.
Thank you, Justin, and I apologize for the delay. I had a technical glitch. I think it was my laptop, and I'm rebooting it right now. So I've joined from my iPad, and it's funny how that works, right? The technology worked great during the rehearsal, and it decided to glitch on me today. So it's, first of all, let me start by saying I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I can just do a brief introduction. So as Justin mentioned, I'm the Global Executive Director of Customer Experience at General Motors. What that really means is that my team works on all aspects of the customer experience, from the time a customer purchases a vehicle to servicing it, owning it, and using some of our subscription services like OnStar, buying parts, accessories, etc. So we do our best to try to create digital and human experiences for our customers that are simple, seamless, and effortless. I've been at the company over 20 years. I've lived and worked in globally in 5 countries, worked in multiple functions. Most recently, worked in product planning, was responsible for North America product planning, and led some of the studies on our future electric vehicle portfolio as well. At a personal level, I have one of my 3 children has CHARGE syndrome. Most of you may not know what CHARGE is. It's a rare genetic condition that impacts 1 in 10,000 individuals. It's a very complex medical condition that impacts many parts of the body, or different organs and functions, and is one of the leading causes of deaf blindness. So through my son Aman, we've really experienced how as parents to be advocates for him and to find just different solutions to help him adapt and enjoy the things that he enjoys doing, like reading and being outdoors. So we use adaptive technologies and things like that. So delighted to be here and to be part of this panel. Thank you for including me.
Thank you so much. And for those of us just joining us today, to reiterate, this is a seminar on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And in today's workforce, as careers in STEM are growing, they're growing exponentially and more diverse. So we are partnering MDA and GM to bring together a conversation around accessibility, diversity, and inclusion in STEM education and in STEM-based careers. Many of you submitted questions for our panelists when you registered, and we have compiled those questions, and we'll do our best to get to each one. We'll also have about 10 minutes at the end for you to ask any additional questions. Please type your questions into the chat box by hovering over the bottom of your screen and clicking on the chat feature. So why don't we get started with a few of the questions that have been submitted by the audience. So first off, how about Joseph, why don't you answer, as a parent, what can a parent do to prepare a child to pursue an education or career in STEM?
I think the thing that helped me most was, I had a professor at one point when I was early in school that really started mentoring me and taking me under my wing. And what my parents did for me in that situation was really encourage that situation. And I was able to meet with him after school when he was teaching other classes for adult education classes. I was in high school still, and they really pushed me to take advantage of that opportunity and learn as much as I could. Finding if there was anything that they saw that I was interested in, as far as taking things apart or putting them back together again. It was really just all that encouragement of just pursuing it, and making sure that even like having a learning disability growing up, and that they made sure that I was getting the attention that I needed from the teachers, and that if they weren't giving that to me, that they helped me to explain to them what I needed as well. And so I think that's a really important part about it, is being able to be open yourself and teaching your kids to be open about what they have going on, because as with most disabilities, you can't see them. And so even those that you can see, people don't not necessarily know what you're dealing with or what you're capable of. Mm-hmm.
And so you would say that self-advocacy is a very important part of that, right? And that translates into the workforce as well?
I would say that's very important as part of the workplace. You have to, it can be difficult and it can be scary. And I will tell you that it's very hard to open up to people and let them know what do you have going on. But it's one that you have to be comfortable with yourself. And when you are, people are more willing to want to learn from you than anything else. Most people do not want to have a negative association or attitude when you speak to them.
So kind of on that note, what I guess would, from one of our questions that we have, what would you, how would you advocate for yourself and for those accommodations that someone with a disability might need in the workplace?
So the way that we are very fortunate that we have, like I said, we have GM Able, which we used to be known as People with Disabilities, but we rebranded as GM Able to say that it's not a disability. We are all just different. We have different abilities. And so one of the ways that we try to advocate is giving people that sounding board to spread that message. Being honest with your direct leadership and asking for advice on where to go when you're in the workplace. When you're in school, it's talking to your professors. Like I said, I think it's really just be comfortable. It's having a disability is not who you are. It's just part of you. And if you look at it that way, I think you can be much more comfortable with talking about it.
And Matthew, I know that we talked earlier when we were preparing about this, and you mentioned your own personal experience with your disabilities at college and advocating. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I did not advocate during college, and my experience was significantly worse than it would have been otherwise. And I didn't because my disabilities are invisible. Like Joseph, I have a learning disability and I have mental disabilities. And I was, to some extent, able to successfully hide these. And it cost me a lot in the long run. And I figured this out when I became a professor prior to joining General Motors, because there I was required to teach students with disabilities. And as part of that, you go through the Federal Education and Rights Privacy Act training, which includes sections on students with disabilities, and that every university is required to have something that will be called essentially an office for students with disabilities, where you can go in and you can tell them what accommodations you need, and you can have these agreed upon, and then your professors are required to align with these. There is no professor who gets to say, well, I don't do that. It's illegal, and the universities are very specific about maintaining compliance because it's a very important thing for them. And so the way to advocate is to get involved with that office and to go find out what it is. They will probably tell you about that at orientation, and to have your accommodations set up through them, because your professors have no ability to contradict you there. Having professors that you can talk to is great, and being able to disclose is a wonderful thing. But to ensure that there is equity, these offices exist, and that is the entire purpose. Everyone that I've ever dealt with, the people involved have been very enthusiastic about advocating for students with disability and ensuring they have the most positive experience on campus that they can.
And so on that note, as engineers, as employees of GM, you're also designing cars that have to, that could be used by people with disabilities. So this question is for Amrit. As engineers designing cars of the future, how do you think about accessibility and universal design in your work?
Yeah, no, thank you, Justin. That's a very good question and a very pertinent one, given everything that we're doing with our future product portfolio today. I'll start by saying we're getting much better at this, I think, as an industry as well, and we're spending a lot of time really embodying inclusive design, the principles of inclusive design. And I'll just share a few anecdotes and examples. You know, we've got an accessibility steering group. We're running what we call barrier-free customer clinics, which means we go out, we talk to customers, we understand their, you know, how they use their vehicle, We use design thinking principles, which is really around, empathy interview, right? So you go and you interview somebody, you ask open-ended questions, you empathize, you listen, and you start to, draw some insights and conclusions about how they use their vehicle and what's important to them. And that type of methodology has proven to be very effective in trying to find out. Mostly there are things that are what we call unmet needs, things that people wish they had, but they don't have, right? And that's the key to this principle of design thinking and empathy interviews. So we've identified some key areas where we focus on specifically as it relates to designing accessible vehicles, things like entry and egress, getting in and out of the vehicle. I experienced that firsthand with my son. Right, being deafblind, especially in SUVs, trying to get in and out can be it can be difficult for him. So we try to find ways to make that, things like running boards, grab handles, all of those things make a difference. So, we're spending a lot of time understanding those types of things, obviously understanding the needs of individuals with wheelchairs and how to make vehicles more wheelchair accessible. Seating is a really important area too, how to work on seating comfort. That tends to be one of the things we hear a lot. And then storage and cargo space, and especially, and one more area that's really, I would call it an emerging area, is human machine interface, HMI, or connectivity. You can see now cars have large screens, and trying to, especially a lot of voice recognition, trying to make those technologies more accessible as well. So there's a lot of opportunity as the vehicle of the future is changing. As you know, we're going electric. We're introducing a lot of electric vehicles. The vehicles we have are more connected. There's a lot more technology. So we're spending a lot of time trying to just, use things like design thinking and empathy interviews to understand what our customers would want, and use inclusive design principles. So when we design technologies, it's not just for a certain sets of population. There are features and that will appeal to a large group of people as well, but be inclusive at the same time. Thank you. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, that did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So on that note, Christy, I know that you're working with the autonomous vehicles, and as Amrit talked about, that human-computer interaction. So I guess first off, why don't you talk a little bit about how exactly you're paving the way technologically, and then also how you're making that human-computer interaction accessible, inclusive, especially things like safety, especially emergency situations. You never know what's going to happen when you're driving a car. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin. So, General Motors recognizes that, with the millions of, individuals in America that don't quite have access to the transportation that they need, there's just a huge potential for autonomous vehicles to provide access to transportation for folks that don't have that today. So most of our focus right now is working with Cruise automation just to figure out how to get the autonomous vehicles to drive safely, right? It's new territory for us. We're very, very early on this journey, and we're very, very much focused on making this work in a rideshare environment in dense urban areas. So most of our, in fact, almost all of our development work is happening in San Francisco, California. It's a very complex environment where the vehicles are learning to drive autonomously there. And given that we recognize the potential for the autonomous vehicles to provide more accessibility, we also have to think about what aspects of that accessibility, like you mentioned, Justin, are important. I'll give you an example. You mentioned an emergency situation. In the back of my vehicle, which is the Cruise autonomous vehicle, we have a set of buttons that are available for customers that are riding. And one thing that we worked on very closely with crews this year is to make sure that those buttons had accessible features, right? If you were an individual, for example, that was experiencing maybe low vision, would you be able to feel the buttons? What features are on it? You know, would you know how to, or which button to push if you wanted to end the ride, or if you felt like you were in a situation where you wanted to get out of the vehicle? So that's just one pretty simple and straightforward example. It seems like a small thing, right? It's a button set, but if you're someone that's getting into that vehicle for the first time, and you want to be able to, and you need to know that that person is going to know which button to push, those features that we talked about are really important. We spent quite a bit of time on those to make sure that they were done properly. So that's one small example. You know, the potential is endless. And again, most of my focus is, you know, getting the car to drive safely, but working very closely with crews along the way to think of things like I just mentioned, to make sure that, you know, it's accessible and those features are going to work for everyone and is going to give everyone the access that they need to transportation.
So we've had a few questions in the chat regarding workplace accessibility. Amanda, if you wanted to ask a few of those questions, as you've had experience yourself and a few of our panelists have as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So we had a couple questions come in, and some that we already had of kind of Matthew, if you could touch on this a bit. You know, how you talked about accommodations in school, and kind of sort of how to go about doing that. But I think some people were interested in knowing, you know, how you discuss accommodations in the workplace, and whether or not that should be something you do before you're hired, in the process of being hired, or later on.
So one of the things that General Motors is explicitly striving to do is to be a company where people feel comfortable disclosing disability and need for accommodations during the hiring process. I'm also involved with GM Able, and this is something that we have talked about explicitly, that we are working with HR and how to improve our corporate culture so that this is something that can be engaged with during the hiring process. And as part of that, I've recently been doing recruiting and hiring. And so the way that you can do this is that once you apply within GM, you are contacted by someone from our talent acquisition office, one of our recruiters. And if you tell them, I need accommodations as part of this hiring process, they will make sure to work with our human resources department to ensure that those accommodations are taken into account and that you are treated fairly. One of those things that we want to make sure that we do is be as fair and equitable in our hiring practices as possible. But should you choose not to disclose during the hiring process, and this is entirely your decision, no one has any responsibility or requirement to disclose at any point. Should you choose to disclose, you can get in contact with the Human Resources Department. I'm currently involved with this with one of my employees to be able to discuss what the accommodations are that they need. And our HR department has been nothing but helpful in ensuring that what the employees need to be able to get their jobs done, just as well as absolutely anybody, are provided to them.
Thank you for that. And so kind of you talked about how GM is trying to make a more inclusive and easier way for going about getting these accommodations for new hires. How did you personally navigate the hiring process when you were first starting off, or even at GM?
Yeah, so my story continues to be one of having made this mistake of not asking. And, you know, when Justin asked me how did you advocate for yourself during college, the reason I wanted to answer that was because as I look back now, my life would have been better and easier in ways that it didn't have to be hard. if I had been willing to disclose and to own the disabilities that I lived with previously. And when I was hired at GM, while, if I remember correctly, during the hiring process, I chose not to answer. What I have done since is I have disclosed. And it's become an important thing to me as someone who has recently become a people leader to continue to disclose this and to include awareness about my disabilities and the challenges that I've gone through, because one of those things that makes my employees feel comfortable to disclose to the company is knowing that I am also willing to step out in the open and disclose as well. And so your question was, how did I navigate that? I navigated it by pretending it didn't exist, because this was the culture that I grew up in. And it's been a really personal journey through 2020 and into 2021 to accept this and to grow and change and to understand that I dealt with things I didn't have to, and to then decide that other people should not make the same mistakes that I did in this realm.
Amanda, if I could add to that, and Matthew, thank you so much for sharing your example. I think it's really, really important to advocate for yourself. I can share an anecdote as an example. You know, a few years ago, I had an HR colleague of mine contact me, let me know that, you know, one of the very talented people we selected for a role had a specific medical condition that needed accommodation, and she had, you know, gone out of her way to advocate for that. And my reaction was I was very thankful that she did. And, you know, we made all the reasonable arrangements to accommodate her condition. And I can tell you, she's done extremely well in the company, and, you know, 3 years on and, you know, having rotated several jobs, is doing really well. So I wanted to share that example only because, you know, there are companies and people out there that are willing to accommodate and are willing to listen. And, you know, as long as you take the time to advocate for yourself, you know, that's where it starts, right? So I was very grateful to this individual for doing that, and we made all the accommodations, and, you know, we're better off to have her in the company, and she's done extremely well as well. So, you know, I just wanted to share that anecdote as well as a hiring manager, you know, having experienced that, and we continue to see more and more examples like that.
And I think that it's great once you're able to get to that point where you can be able to get hired. But I think a lot of times, sometimes students might feel discouraged to even take that first step towards actually pursuing a career in STEM or reaching out to find that job. So a question for you, Veronica. I know that you worked on the Smithsonian STEM curriculum. So for teachers of students with disabilities, how can they encourage students not to fear difficult subjects involved in STEM, and how can you get them to realize that their disability won't necessarily interfere with aspects involved in STEM?
Thank you so much for that question. And I have enjoyed listening to everyone share today. And like Albert said, I just want to thank people for sharing so openly. This question is, I think, very important because oftentimes people will shy away from studying, you know, STEM type subjects because one, either they think that they're too difficult, or two, they have a fear of failure. And so one of the things actually that I heard someone say as we were preparing material for the Zero Barriers in STEM activity was that I want it understood to students that when you try to present a new technology or a new subject or a new topic to them, if something happens and their success is not met the first time they try to learn it or the first time they try to execute it, it's not that they failed. It's that the technology failed them. I thought that was really powerful. So if you look at that from a subject perspective, maybe the first attempt that someone did to try to teach something to someone was not successful. Doesn't mean that that person cannot learn it. What it means is that I haven't unlocked the proper way to teach it to you in a way that resonates with you, in a way in which you can understand it, right? We have tremendous capability to understand as the human race, right? And so, but everyone doesn't learn in the same way. therefore everyone shouldn't be taught in the same way. So I would say, one, start with the premise that everyone can learn, everyone can be successful in this area. Now, if you learn it and you don't like it, that's one thing. I will never advocate that STEM is for everyone. What I will advocate for is that you should have a choice, right? You shouldn't shy away. You should at least try it. So when we get to the point where we're just trying it, start with a broad base and let the students know, you know what, this might be a different topic for you. Maybe it's one you've tried in the past and you really haven't felt like, you really hit it out of the park. That's fine. That's fine. We're going to try different ways and different methods and go through different examples until we identify a way that clicks for you. And if that way happens to be different than the way that clicks for another student, that's fine. That's not an issue, because most of the time when you work in a STEM area, you're really trying to solve a problem or you're trying to meet a need, and you'll be solving that problem and meeting that need for a variety of people who will learn and address it in different ways. So the input and insight that you have to offer will be valuable in meeting that solution. So I really encourage people to try, be open to the subject. And if you love it, great, continue to nurture it. And if you don't, at least you know that you have the ability to do that. And it's just not something that is your strongest interest.
Thank you. Kind of jumping off of that a bit, you were saying, everybody should have the choice to be able to pursue STEM if they'd like. So someone had asked, that they have a bachelor's in technology, a degree, and software development, and have muscular dystrophy. And they've been searching for a job in their field since they graduated in January of last year, but they haven't had any luck because employers seem to want experience. And so we were just kind of wondering, how do they get someone to give them a chance to prove that they are capable of doing that job?
That's a great question. And you know what? They graduated in January. I'm thinking of this year. Is that probably what they're saying? And this is a difficult time to have graduated, right? Because we have so many things going on in the world right now. So my first thing to say to you is congratulations. I'm glad that you graduated and looking forward to having you in the STEM community. And the second thing I would say to you is be persistent. Sometimes it takes time to convince someone that, you know what, I am the right individual for this job and I am the one that can meet the needs. So if you hear no 8 times, but that ninth time you hear yes, that's fine, because you only need one yes. And some people are able to get it the first time, and some of us have to bat, a little bit longer before we're successful. And so one, I would say be persistent. The other thing that I would say too is if there are any opportunities for you to volunteer, like maybe to work with other people that are studying STEM or students right now, I would encourage you to do that, because it keeps you active in the field. It also helps you build your network. And so you might be able to, meet other people that are contacts that can help refer you to some opportunities out there that may not be as publicly known as what you might be able to find online. So look for ways to keep yourself active in the STEM area. If you can volunteer and give back to your community, that can be a great way to do it. And just, continue to be persistent, because eventually you will land at the right opportunity. This is a field that's growing, leaps and bounds, and we need all types of resources to be engaged and contributing. So be persistent.
So I would like to add to that, because I've been involved in a bunch of hiring recently, like, as I said, look, especially if you graduated in January of this year, and I think even potentially back to January of last year, for what are called new college hire programs. We have one here at General Motors that will take students who have just graduated and will evaluate them and will, accept that you are in your first job out of college. And a point of our new college hire program is specifically to help you grow as a professional and to develop those skills beyond simply the technical skills of software development or whatever is out, or whatever your particular field is, in order to be able to be a member of the professional community. And these are usually some number of years. They include additional training. They include benefits and various other things, and are specifically designed to give college hires that leg up that they need to be successful in the workforce.
Christy, I know that you actually found you began your career at GM through a co-op. So if you could talk a little bit about your transition from college into industry, that would be great.
I would be happy to, Justin. I think that in terms of, going out and finding that career after college, one of the things that you can do while you're in college is really search for some of the opportunities that Veronica and Matthew just identified, either an internship or a co-op job, which is, I think, more of a repeated opportunity to come back over the course of 4 years and work for the same employer. What those kind of opportunities will do for you is give you a lot of that kind of real world work experience that you can then add to your resume. And then when you're going out after you've graduated and you're trying to find a place to land, a lot of employers really, really value that kind of experience. If you can, have solid evidence that you've worked with a team, either at your university or at an internship or in a co-op type assignment, those are the kind of situations that you're going to be in industry. So if you've proven that you can do that and you have some experience, I think that's really going to be of help to you. The other thing is, in addition to finding at least 1 or 2 good solid internships or co-op jobs, particularly in the area of engineering, and this is not something that I took advantage of, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I wish I would have. Project teams, school project teams, some of the ones that I'm thinking of that are specific to the automotive industry are, like Formula SAE. They have a Baja program, a solar car program. Now they have terrific programs like Auto Drive, where students are actually, adding autonomous components to a vehicle, or EcoCar. If you can be a part of one of those project teams in college, you're also going to be given the same opportunities and be in a lot of the same situations that we are in industry. That's also something that you can add to your resume that's gonna, employers will notice that and say, wow, here's someone that's coming in that has some experience. Perhaps it wasn't, like Veronica said, paid experience. You volunteered your time. But I find that, new hires and engineers that come to work for me that have served on one of those program teams are able to just hit the ground running. So those are a couple of things to think about. Are these things required? No, they're not required. But, given how competitive the job market is these days, I find that those are, having at least one internship is a great way to kind of bolster your resume and give yourself an advantage when you're in your job search. I want to go back to just something I said about, like, Christy, why didn't you, like, you're a chief engineer, why weren't you ever on a project team? Back in the 90s, when I was a mechanical engineering student, I graduated from the University of Michigan. Not only was I often one of the only women in my engineering courses, I looked at those project teams and I didn't see a whole lot of people that looked like me. And so I think during that 4-year period, while I had interest and I looked at it, the fact that it just, I had a hard time seeing myself doing it, again, because I had a hard time identifying with the members of those teams. So it's been really encouraging for me, especially now that I'm on the other side of this in industry, working with some of those teams, and I see that they have so much more of a diverse makeup now. I say to myself, if I was in college, again, I would see a whole lot of people that looked like me on those teams, and I'd probably be on a team. So I just wanted to, I'm so encouraged by it, but it was certainly different, 25 years ago when I was coming through university.
Thank you, Christy, for that. Kind of piggybacking off of, how you were saying being a woman in STEM. this is kind of, for you or for any of the other panelists, if you feel comfortable answering, how do you think that we can increase the representation of leaders like yourselves with disabilities in the STEM fields?
I think if we can, similar to what I said, if we can find more people with disabilities right now to fill some of those roles, first of all, it will send a very clear message that this is not a question of ability. And again, I think it's really powerful when you can see someone that you identify with occupying a leadership role. It helps you understand that I see a path to that too. So again, all disabilities are not visible. I don't say that comment I understand that, but I think if we can get more leaders, even for those disabilities that aren't visible, I think being more vulnerable and talking about maybe ones they have, and other people saying, wow, I didn't know that. Well, if they can do it, then I can do it. I think that's another part of it too. Perhaps those people, are already there. Those are two thoughts that I have, that just coming from being female, and having a lot of female mentors in leadership and seeing females advance in the company, has really kind of given me the confidence to say, if they can do it, then I can do it too. I think that it might be similar for people with disabilities as well.
So I would like to add to this, because not to continue reiterating it, although I'm finding that it's an important thing to reiterate. I am now a leader with a disability. And the reason I keep reiterating it is just because I am a leader with a disability. And the only way that people see that is if you keep telling them that. And one of the things that we've talked about in GM Able is that there are likely leaders within General Motors with disabilities who have not disclosed these publicly, and that is entirely their choice. But part of the reason that this happens is that, as I mentioned previously, the culture that we, as the people who've come into leadership, come from is one in which your disability was something to be hidden. This was the culture in which I was raised, and this, as I've said, has caused me significant harm throughout life. And one of the things I'm really, really proud of that has come out of this last year of quarantine is the acknowledgement of disabilities and of the challenges that everybody faces, and that if we can break down the stigma associated with this, higher levels of leadership will begin to acknowledge and disclose and become open about what their statuses are. And so we as leaders have a responsibility to, I think, disclose, because it is in the best interest of our employees. But there is also a social stigma and a context in which we exist and that we bring with us that is an impediment we have a responsibility to overcome as part of that.
Yeah, and I think I'll just echo that too from Matthew was saying, like, because I'm a people leader as well and a hiring manager as well, and I said when I was younger and when I was in college, I didn't talk to everybody about having a disability. I did talk to certain people, and even at work, there are people that are fully aware of things that I have, and there are people that are not, and it's not always going to be comfortable. I'm partially deaf, so I talk very loud when I'm in person, and I've been told I was rude, and I had to pull the people aside and say, I'm not rude. I speak very loud because I can't hear myself. And it didn't go well because they still said, well, you're just being rude. It's not always going to go well for you. It's not always going to be pleasant, but you are your advocate. And as corny as I think Matthew knows, we've said this with some of our other leadership in GM Able, you have to be the change that you want to see. If you want to see it happen, you have to be there. You have to be vulnerable to it. And we are doing everything we can to advocate to our leaders above us to say, we all have dealt with it, whether it's a temporary physical disability, whether it's something to do with mental health. We've all been there. And I know there's a lot of kids on the line. We were all teenagers, and there's not one adult that's listening right now that can't say they weren't depressed when they were a teenager. So we all know how it feels to live with something in our lives, whether it's us or somebody we care about. And if you can internalize that and be comfortable with it and share that, that is how people are going to know that it's okay. And the statement that we keep sharing is, you can't be with us without us.
And Joseph, if you could elaborate a little bit more on not just the difficult conversations with your colleagues, but also those conversations that you have to have with leadership to increase disability representation, not only among your colleagues, but also among executives and leadership.
Sure. So I think one of the problems that we've had, and I think I know because I've been helping with some of and we've had those empathy interviews before, is I brought forth ideas and said, hey, we don't have inclusive design in our vehicles. I had a situation where I had shoulder surgery, and I was in a sling for 6 months. I couldn't get in and out of my vehicle on my own. I couldn't dress myself properly because I didn't know how to do it at that point in time. And I made some suggestions of, hey, if we made these slight tweaks to how you can get in and out of the vehicle, it would make a huge difference. And the response back that you get is, well, yeah, but who's really going to want that? And so it's like, well, me and people that have these challenges are, and you have to sometimes go at it forcefully over and over and over again until you browbeat it to somebody to say, listen, this is real. And you have to try to find a way to make that personal connection, whether it's with a story about you or getting them to realize that they do have a connection. We try to tell people, close your eyes for 30 seconds and just think about, what is your experience with a disability, whether it's somebody you love, whether it's somebody you know, or yourself. Personal stories that I've shared, personal stories like with what Emmer has shared about with his child, those things really get to people, and they're hard to have, but they do make an impact.
Veronica, I think you had something you wanted to add on this?
Yeah, I wanted to yes and everything that I heard everyone on the panel say. And then I wanted to add that in order for us to see the change in the composition of the leadership and the executives that we want to see, and for it to really be representative of the communities in which we operate and the customer base in which we serve, we need to be intentional. It's not just going to happen organically, and it's not just going to happen by individuals being more willing to be more open and disclose more personal stories. If people are at a place where they can do that, that is wonderful. That definitely adds to the equation. But the onus is not on the individual who's in the underrepresented group to be the only voice that's advocating for change. We need to also have our allies come forward, and we need to speak to this. And when we don't see the level of diversity and inclusion that we say we want, because at General Motors, we had Mary Barra, our CEO, stand up and say, we want to be the most inclusive company in the world, right? So that gives me carte blanche to ask the question anytime I want to, when I'm looking at a slate of interviewees, or I'm looking at, we're having discussions about advancement and different opportunities. Is this the most inclusive that we can be? Is this the slate that we think is, the best to have, right? Is this really going to give us the robust decision-making process and solution generation that we want to have as a company? And so we all need to have a voice in that, and that voice needs to be loud. And I'm going to use the word that I used again when the individual asked about obtaining a job. It needs to be persistent, because it can't just be something that gets a lot of energy at one point and then dies away. Unfortunately, biases are real, and even people that want to do the right thing, they continue to pop up. And we almost have a very narrow view of what we think capable is, right? We need to expand that, because capability looks different in different situations, right? And things can be addressed in manners that may have not been addressed in the same way in the past. And so I would just say this is a situation where no one can be on the sideline. All voices have to be in advocating for this, and you need to intentionally push if we want to see it happen.
To use GM's new slogan, everybody in.
I like that.
And Amrit, as the Director for Enterprise Customer Experience, you must work with a lot of different companies that have a lot of different needs, different, I guess, things that need to be accommodated. Have you ever had experiences where you've need to dealt with disability experience, and how do you work with those, bringing it into the customer experience realm?
Yes, no, you know, GM Able, our affinity group, is an excellent resource as a voice within the company. And, you know, we leverage GM Able a lot. In fact, we've been working with GM Able to come up with a proposal on how to drive accessible solutions within the vehicle design process, as well as customer experience as well within the company. And as you can imagine, in a company as large as GM, there are, you know, thousands of people working on dozens of product programs, hundreds of technologies. And when we talk about, you know, introducing accessible technologies or accessible inclusive design within processes that have been established for a long, long time, you know, we need some new ways of doing things, new processes that we need to put in place. So yes, I have dealt with examples, and I do that every day. And one of the things we're looking to do is have, you know, we have product manager roles in the company. These are individuals that come up with requirements for IT developers to work on within customer experience, for example. So if an IT developer is working on a digital technology, somebody has to write the requirements for that developer to go code or write, you know, develop that product for that digital interface. And, you know, we're in the midst of assigning an individual and a group to work on, you know, what do those requirements look like for, with accessibility in mind for individuals that have different types of needs. And we're using research to feed that process as well, you know, empathy interviews and design thinking. So we're on the cusp of doing a lot of those types of things as a company. And I'm really, really excited because you know, every GM Able meeting I go to, I see a lot of people advocating more and more and being more comfortable to speak up because it's a safe place to do that. And we've created that environment, that climate where it's, you know, individuals can feel comfortable to talk about their condition, their needs, and we're doing our best to create that climate every day. So Justin, I hopefully answered your question. I try to provide a few anecdotes and examples, but, you know, we do work with you know, even within GM on a number of different teams, product teams, right? So that's the best example I can think of.
Thank you, Amrit. So this question is kind of for Joseph, but anybody else who would like to put some input. We've had a couple people asking, you guys have talked a lot about GM Able, and we were just wondering if one of you might be able to go into a little bit more of what GM Able is and what basically the group speaks to within GM.
Sure. So GM Able is it's an employee affinity group. So we call them our employee resource groups, and it is one of the groups that is open to every employee, whether you have a disability, whether you are an ally or a caregiver. And we make that very clear on our site within General Motors. And so what we do is we try to make sure we bring the voice of those within the disabilities community and the caregivers to light at General Motors, whether it's in our vehicle designs, whether it's in accommodations in the workplace. One of the things, I started back in 2015, and when I started, GM Able was actually only about 25 members when I started. We are at 547 today, and we actually had our first all-people meeting where it was open to everybody in the company, and we had, I think, 550 people called in to see that all-people meeting, which was amazing to me, having never had one with the group before. And so we advocate within General Motors. Now, what I do as the community outreach and lead for GM Able is I also work with organizations that are outside of GM. One of the big ones I have not been able to in the last 2 years, but is with Special Olympics of Michigan, and we typically go there and help with all the spring games at Macomb, and then we will also help out in Canton with the national games. Again, when I started with GM, we would have maybe 25, 30 people that would go out. Back in 2019, when we were able to do it last, we had 150 of us there that were helping out with the games every day. There's a school in Warren called Rising Stars Academy that is for young adults with disabilities, that teaches them life skills, and it's actually ran by Chef Mark, and they teach how to cook and how to get jobs within that industry. And we were actually able to work with our executive sponsor, who's since retired, but a lot of the kids from that school actually got hired into the cleaning services at General Motors because of their work with GM Able. And so we have a very broad of what we try to do, but it's very focused on bringing the needs of the disabilities community to light to the rest of General Motors, and to share with the community that General Motors does look at this as something that's important.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. I just wanted to add something onto that about GM Able. We invited the GM Able leadership into our autonomous vehicle all people meeting, just to, number one, introduce the group to the team, talk about some of the work that we're doing on accessibility. And it was just, it was so wonderful and eye-opening for me to see the level of engagement from our engineering team, because even if you yourself don't identify with having a disability, chances are someone that you love does. So it was just really great to see the engagement from our team and some of the questions, because so many, this is a part of our life. It's a part of someone that we love's life. And just that amount of exposure just really brought that to light for me. So it's really great. They've been making their way around the company, and telling everyone, hey, this is what we're about. And again, you don't have to identify as having a disability. Maybe someone that you love does, or maybe you're caring for someone. Maybe you have a temporary disability. This is a group that you can be a part of, that can really be of great assistance to you. So that was really, really, really wonderful to see.
Now, Christy, I know that you mentioned bringing in the GM Able team to the autonomous vehicles. Veronica, I wanted to switch over to you. You work on electric vehicle growth and in that area. So is there work with electric vehicles and accessibility, whether that be charging or other areas within the electric vehicle field?
Yes, there is effort that's going on in that space. In fact, one of the things that I know also complements the GM Able group is there's actually an engineering work group out of our Advanced Vehicle Development Center. And a lot of this are engineers who have kind of volunteered for this assignment or volunteered for this work in addition to their primary assignment, where we actually take a look at different features and different architectural designs of new vehicle programs to see how do they rate for accessibility and how can we improve upon that. And one of the things that we do out of the Electric Vehicle Center of Expertise is that we maintain a close touch point with that group, because once we identify the features and the content that we really feel like, help make the vehicle more accessible to a wider demographic of customers, we make sure that we catalog that in our product strategies so that we can advocate to make sure that that content continues to stay in future vehicles and future electric vehicles, and that we find ways to enhance it, to make sure that it continues to grow over time. So that is definitely an area in which we have a pulse that we're working with very closely with our Advanced Vehicle Development Engineering organization, and making sure that that's something that we continue to monitor and integrate into our products moving forward.
Thank you. And another question from the chat was, what type of engineering has to do with inventing technological equipment? Now, that's a pretty broad question. And in the case of in General Motors, you have lots of different components, lots of different people coming together. So I guess this is a broad question for everybody. How do you all work together to design a car, build a car, and what are all of the engineers involved? And then finally, you know, sell the car, bring it to market. So we could talk about all of those different opportunities for people that want to get involved in STEM at General Motors.
Justin, I'd be happy to start. I mean, when I just think about degrees or majors or the kind of engineer that you are, all types of engineering bring technology to market. I think of the makeup of my own team. On my team, I have engineers with chemical engineering degrees. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I work on an electric vehicle and one that drives itself. I work with industrial and manufacturing engineers. Once we decide, you know, when we design the technology, we have to be able to build it and scale it. So I just named, I think, 3 or 4 engineering disciplines there that all have to work together to bring some sort of advanced technology or technology period from concept to all the way to reality. We also have computer engineers that work on a lot of our software, on our IT systems that are necessary for doing all of this work. So one of the wonderful things about, you know, pursuing engineering, and this is what went through my mind. Honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I knew if I was an engineer, I wouldn't be limited. If I had an engineering degree, I couldn't think of one single thing that maybe I decided I would go and do where they'd say, you know what, I don't think you've learned the right thing. It's all about solving problems. So it all, like, pick one. We all work together.
Christy, if I could just piggyback on that. That's a great response, by the way. Like Christy, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I picked mechanical engineering, you know, in the 90s because that's mostly what you did. But I can honestly tell you, having worked at GM, I worked with all disciplines of engineering, people who came from multiple different disciplines of engineering, you know, chemical engineers, like you said, mechatronics, electrical engineers, software engineers. And, you know, you almost have to look at your major as kind of the starting point. And then the journey to learn never ends. You keep learning. And I've learned a lot from my colleagues, quite frankly, who came from different backgrounds, and whether it was engineering and even finance and other disciplines as well. So, you know, one of the most rewarding things of working for a company like GM is you get exposed to so many different talented people that come from different backgrounds. And your learning is sort of kind of a process, right? Your undergrad is just the starting point, what you major in, and you continually learn through your career. So, like Christy said, pick one.
Yeah, I would
pick the one you like, and you know, start with that.
Yeah,
So,
I would amplify what I heard Christy and Amrit say. I've worked with all different types of engineering disciplines. I think I mentioned my undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering, but what studying STEM and what studying engineering teaches you is methodical problem solving and how to look at things with an inquisitive mind and how to process and put things into systems. And once you have that skill set, it is transferable across different areas of our organization. And I would, you know, advocate that it's transferable like that across different industries as well. So it is not limiting. And as someone who works in this field, you constantly are learning because technology is advancing, things are changing, and because of that, in order to stay current and still be able to be effective, you will continue to learn and grow as well.
Yeah, and I will say one of the things that I think is exciting for General Motors, we have, we call it iHub, and it's called our Innovation Hub, and it started, I believe, in 2016 or 17, and the really cool thing about that is we had it open to anybody. You could be in any field within General Motors that you wanted to and join and go. We had a competition to how do we design the next thing that our customers want. And we had some empathy clinics and people get in and out of your car for me. Just let me watch you get in and out of your car 20 times and drive me around. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And I was on a team with a mechanical engineer, a software engineer, somebody from finance, and myself. And so we were all from all over the company. And there was about 6 teams like that. And what's really cool is I think out of that first event that we held, I think there was 10 patents that were awarded to GM out of that. And it was across all disciplines. To bring technology together, all you have to have is an idea and like everybody's saying, put the ideas together. Once you can start putting those pieces together, you don't have to be able to figure it out yourself. And problem is, you're not going to most of the time. You're going to need all of those other people that have all of those other expertises to help put their ideas into place and help figure out where yours fits in with it.
So I'm going to take a left turn here because I'm not an engineer, I'm a scientist. And that's what I run, is a group of scientists. And, that's the S at the beginning of STEM. And we, part of the reason I wanted to interject here is that there is a perception that if you get a degree in physics or in mathematics or biology or chemistry or these other things that are not directly applied disciplines as engineering disciplines are seen. And there's a disconnect that occurs there, because as the study of science and technology has evolved, we've seen that really everything just washes right back and forth between them. But GM also has plenty of things that you can do that are not just inventive in the sense of creating new technology, but inventive in the sense of discovering new phenomena. So my job is in artificial intelligence, and the scientists that I've hired come from backgrounds like mechanical engineering and physics, but I also have transportation engineers, I have atmospheric scientists, I have materials scientists, I have applied mathematicians, and one of the things that our group has explicitly looked for is what I have been referring to as intellectual diversity. That for the kinds of problems that we are to solve, these ones of there is not a solution yet, you have to go discover and invent it yourself. So one of our other chief engineers refers to this as invention in the critical path of product development. And to be able to do that, we need as broad a collection of skills as we can get. And the thing that brings us all together are the technical skills around AI and machine learning that then present us with a way to be able to talk with one another. And so engineering is great. I love my engineering colleagues, but I also want to make sure that students are not shied away from, being a physicist, because that's what they get really excited about. Like, as I have gone through hiring, I care more about when I ask you, so what was your work like? When your eyes light up and you go, I can talk about this for 9 hours. Are you sure you want me to answer this question? I absolutely do, because it shows me how when you do something that you are passionate about, it infects you. And more than any necessary technical skills you may come in with, that ability to just be passionate about your work and go, well, I'll learn things that I need as I go and I am capable of learning, are some of the most important skills that anybody in STEM can have, in my opinion. Just that innate and unending curiosity to know more.
There's
Yeah,
a really important, sorry if I can
oh,
just,
go
there's
ahead.
a really important theme that came across in a couple of the comments, and it's around the diversity, intellectual diversity, and the diversity of experiences. What I find particularly rewarding is when you can assemble a diverse group of individuals. When I talk about diversity of backgrounds, diversity of experiences, diversity of, just their technical education, let's say, or other forms of education. Oftentimes we get the most innovative ideas when you get groups of people getting together that come from different places and different backgrounds. And I've seen that a lot in the company. And what's become very obvious to me is success oftentimes comes down to how those teams come together and they problem solve together. And we have some very complex problems that we're trying to solve in our industry, in our company, and it takes a team. And it's really rewarding to see that happen when it happens, and it happens a lot. So I think there's oftentimes you're going to find yourself that you bring your skill set, but then you're also going to work with other talented people from different backgrounds to solve problems together.
So one of the things I want to add to that, not to continue on this topic forever, but that my group recently went through. So we have a panel, we have a book club that we do to be able to address what biases we may have and to consider parts of the study of technology and engineering and the development to make sure that we can be more equitable. And there is well-founded sociological research out there that not only does diversity in your experiences and in the skills that get brought improve the product overall, but it specifically helps find biases in development before they become significant problems. So my area of artificial intelligence is very much wrestling with this as a problem that we all have to deal with. And so it's at the forefront of my mind, but the subject matter remains applicable everywhere. So one of the things the able Vice President, Alan Hedgel, likes to talk about is the development of this Nike shoe that you just put your foot in and it loads itself up and you can take your foot out. So this was designed for disabled persons, but it's sold out because everybody just wanted it. And the revenue increase that is had by ensuring that inclusion is included in development practices and our engineering practices, and all of these things is on the order of doubling what the return on that investment is. It is not just a good thing to do because we think that it is ethical. It is a good practice overall for any business entity to make sure that these things are how they are performing their business.
You know, Matthew, I think that is a very powerful statement to make. And I am reminded of a documentary I watched earlier this year. It was called Coded Biases. And I don't know if anyone has seen that, but it talks about just what you're talking about, the value of having diverse perspectives, backgrounds, experiences in the development process of technology so that it can serve, you know, a wide demographic of individuals. And I think, you know, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend that. And the other thing that I would say too is when you improve accessibility, you might be targeting improving it for one demographic, but you improve it for everyone, right? So just like the shoe example that you use, you've expanded and enhanced and made the product better for everyone. So the business gains that come from that, in addition to, you know, the social governance that you want to do as well, really just amplifies the work that you know, people are advocating for in this space.
Justin and Marissa, can you tell we're all passionate about this?
So actually, speaking about passionate, you know, and you guys have all talked about how many countless job positions and people that you work with to bring these products to market. You know, I kind of understand that a bit being in the pharmaceutical industry myself. That it takes so many people, and honestly, to do what you guys do, you have to have that passion, like where Matthew, you said, you know, oh, I could go on about this for 9 hours, or, you know, do you really want to ask me that? What really fueled your guys' passion to go into the positions in the area where you are now?
So when I was hired and I was putting my resume in, the tagline that I put in is that I like to solve big problems, ones that are bigger than anybody else has ever solved before. And this is what I did during my dissertation work. And since I came to GM, I've worked on problems the scale of essentially all vehicles in the United States and understanding things about how people use vehicles. And I took my current position back in March. And when I was describing why I did that, I said, because I wanted to solve even bigger problems, and now I couldn't do that by myself. I needed a team to help me get these things done. And I've always wanted to know more. I wanted to be a scientist since as far back as I could remember. And what have I've learned about disability inclusion and these things as they relate to my professional life is that they were always there, even if they weren't being talked about. And that there are additional superpowers that can be brought to the table out of the capabilities considered from everyone, not just the cookie cutters that we might have imagined in decades past.
Amanda, I can take a shot at this one too. Growing up in the Detroit area and being a third generation GM employee, I grew up around cars. Cars were always a big part of my life. They're a big part of this region. And I remember the moment where I decided, not only am I going to pursue engineering, but I want to work on cars. I grew up going to the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. It was an annual thing for my family, and as a young girl, I remember looking at the spokesmodels and thinking, wow, they're wearing beautiful dresses. They look beautiful. I want to be a spokesmodel when I grew up, when I was younger. And then as I got older and I started to love math, science, etc., I started to look at the auto show a little differently. And one year I was there, and the University of Michigan solar car team was there, and they had their like winning, like Sun Racer. They had the car there that like won the competition. And I remember in that moment, it's like, I don't want to stand here and talk about the cars. I want to design the cars. I want to build one of those things. And that memory is very, very clear in my mind. So mine just started with passion about cars. And I still have that passion every day in my life. Nothing is more exciting to me or will get me more giddy than, going for a ride in one of my autonomous cars in San Francisco. That's where it's like I get so pumped up, and it just totally recenters me on the entire mission and everything that we're doing, or just being out at our proving grounds and just being around the cars. It's just been a big part of who I am, and kind of part of my family's legacy. It just feels very natural for me to continue working around those.
Yeah, as far as I can share, I mean, like Matthew, I enjoy difficult problems. The tougher the problem, the more fun it is. But I also thrive on change. And change, we're going through an enormous amount of change as an industry, right? The car as we know it is changing. The future is electric, as we have shared, and it's also, vehicles are getting more connected. We've got autonomous technologies. And so that in itself is exciting, having to work on just the amount of change and the pace of change that we're seeing just externally in the environment. I mean, even little things like how we work, if you think about the last 18 months, that has changed profoundly. And we are questioning, assumptions we had about work, working remotely versus working in a physical location. And so change is one of those things that, I thrive on, and it's truly exciting. And there's a lot of that happening right now. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to, now I studied engineering a long time ago, so I'm trying to remember really what was the driver that put me in that direction. So I will tell you, I did always like the exactness of math and science. I appreciated the fact that there was, at that time in my mind, there's one right answer. And so that initially that was an attractive thing for me. The other thing is, I don't know that anyone ever explicitly said that I couldn't do engineering. But to me, there was like an underlying theme that people thought I wouldn't go into that field, right? Or you didn't see a lot of people like me going into that field. And I think that actually motivated me to go into that field, right? I didn't like people assuming that it was something that I wouldn't do or wouldn't want to do or couldn't be successful doing. So that's initially what drove me to engineering. What keeps me working in this space is a lot of what Amrit said. It's fast, it's dynamic, you get an opportunity to solve significant, challenges. I appreciate the team of people that I work with. I work with a lot of high caliber intelligent people, and that motivates me to be stronger. I'm good at it, and I like doing stuff that I'm good at. So all of those things were really the drivers that kind of, pushed me into the STEM field and then kept me in there as well, for me personally.
And I guess I will say for myself, so I'm not like Matthew, I'm not an engineer by background, or I am by trade, but not by background. I went in got degrees in technology, and it wasn't in engineering. But what drove me there was when like I said, when I was in middle school, and I went to metal shop class, and I was given a hammer and told to go make something, and that's where it started. And then just with the fascination of how everything just worked, and constantly wanting to do that. And with my job now, I've been working on a project to design, and we're getting ready to launch a brand new interface that everybody's going to use to do what we do with our parts to get them available for customers, on how we release them. We've been working on it for 3 years. I've been working on it for 3 years now, and we're finally able to see that. And it's those bigger challenges that are consistently what keep me going with it, finding and looking for those bigger opportunities and challenges, and being able to have those opportunities is what keeps me going for it every day.
Thank you. I think, again, you've shown a lot of passion, and I think that definitely stands out. I mean, you've all volunteered here to be panelists and talk about inclusion, accessibility, and STEM. I think at this point we're going to be moving to Q&A period. So if you have any questions, audience, please feel free to put them in chat. And I think we'll start with the first question here from Noah. And this question is asking about how, as somebody with muscular dystrophy, not being able to go to the bathroom, not being able to do a lot of different ambulatory activities, how can you go to college? And as a college student currently, I think I can answer that, and I think everybody can feel free to answer in if they would like to. For me personally, I had to learn a lot of new things when I went to college. And first and foremost was I had to hire PCAs, or personal care attendants. And for me, that was a very hard process. When you're going into college, when you're in high school, everybody's teaching you how to get a job, not how to hire somebody. And so I had to go through that process. I had to look at people. I had to be like, can this person help me with my day-to-day tasks? And there are lots of different resources around, and it varies by state as to how you can actually get help to get a PCA. Sometimes it's through a state agency, sometimes it's independently. For me, I had to hire a PCA externally for my first 2 years, freshman and sophomore year, my junior and senior year that I was lucky enough. My brother actually got into WPI as well as a robotics engineer. And he got to be my PCA, and I was really thankful for that. But on that note, it's really about self-advocacy and being able to teach people how they can best help you and how to work along with others. And again, as they alluded to today during this panel, teamwork. Really, your PCAs are your team, and being able to do that. So if anybody else would like to add to that, please feel free to.
Yeah, so thanks, Justin. So obviously I'm not in college anymore, but hasn't been too terribly long since I graduated. And kind of similar to Matthew, I'm more ambulatory than other people with my form of muscular dystrophy. So as things started changing as I got older and not being able to do things, it was a lot harder for me to really come to terms with that and actually go out and try and advocate for myself. And the school I went to, so I went to school in Montana, and it's a very different way of living and a very active lifestyle that a lot of people have out there. I know my roommates would go rock climbing on the weekends and do all these crazy things that I couldn't do with them. And just in general, for me, it was harder to go to and from class because it snows a considerable amount out there, and you're basically walking on ice or rolling on ice with wheelchairs and things like that. And so MDA also has a lot of great resources to try and help you find, you know, MDA clinics, or, you know, I know, Justin, you talked about hiring PAs and things like that. In your area, I know there was one that was in Idaho, which was a bit closer to me than the Chicago office. So they also have a lot of great resources to try and help you find those things that you might need to accommodate you to get to and from class. And I know once I was able to get those resources, I did so much better at school, and you know, graduated and was able to graduate with honors and go off and get a really great job. So yeah.
If anybody else on the panel would like to add on to this, that would be great. We are still accepting questions. Feel free to type your questions into chat. If you can't find the chat, just hover over the bottom of your screen and a little chat bubble should show up. You can just click on that and type your question into chat.
So sure, because I'm really glad that the two of you addressed the question as people who have directly gone through this situation. You know, when I coming into this panel and understanding that the audience would be persons with muscular dystrophy, and that there are issues that can occur, you know, specific to this. You know, I understand that holding out unicorns is not the greatest thing ever to do, but when I think about, you know, what can be done, and part of the reason I like my discipline of physics is that, you know, just as a little bit to add on here, one of our most prominent members of the 20th century was Stephen Hawking, who, you know, developed Lou Gehrig's disease as he aged, and became severely disabled over time. And none of this affected his ability to produce truly groundbreaking work in our field. People still speak about Hawking with irreverence and refer to his works, both popular and technical, as some of the greatest that came out of, you know, a gigantic body that was present there. And you know, I can't tell anybody how it would be to try and survive college with muscular dystrophy, but I can say that ambulatory disabilities have not, at least in my field, prevented the ability to participate or to be someone who will be remembered through history for millennia.
Thank you, Matthew. And kind of on that note, even looking at the career side of things, and speaking from personal experience of having an ambulatory disability with spinal muscular atrophy, I work in a lab, just like Matthew talked about. So I'm a scientist, and I'm a biological scientist. And so the labs that I work in, we have to gown in certain ways, and there's a lot of very sometimes physical demands of the job. And I think, like you were saying, it really does come down to advocating for that, because some of the practices that we had in my lab were not normal practices that I would be able to do. I personally struggled to, you know, stand there and try and put coveralls and booties and all this stuff on. So, you know, my supervisors and our group was honestly really good with me coming to them saying, hey, I can't do this. We need to figure out a different way, because this is my job. I have to do this. I have to get into lab, and I can't do it the way that it currently is. So there are, you know, people out there that are more than willing to help when you advocate for you know, whether it be in school or beyond in your career.
Yeah, and I will say with because the common thing that keeps coming back to is being an advocate, whether it's you for yourself or as you as an ally. Just point out that if I hope everybody knows it is Disability Pride Month, and we have been talking at work about what disability pride means, and I know it was said earlier, but it's about being able to bring your whole self. And the ADA, the American Disabilities with the Act, was only signed into law 31 years ago. And I was 9 when it was signed, and I'm thinking there's a bunch of people that were not even born yet on the call, but it has not been around a long time. But what that I hope tells you is that there are people that are fighting for it, and we all had to stand up and fight for ourselves and make our voices heard, and our allies had to stand up and fight to make our voices heard. And you know, the opportunities, you may not be able to do everything the same as everybody else. That doesn't matter. You're able to do the things that you do in your life the way you do them. Ableism is a thing, you're going to encounter it, but just because you have different abilities doesn't mean you don't have the ability. So I think I would encourage everybody to just keep that in mind.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody so much for joining us tonight. And we especially would like to thank our panelists from GM. Thank you for sharing your experiences and insights with us tonight. We are grateful for our partnership with GM and their support of our STEM Connections program this year. We hope everyone leaves tonight's session feeling informed and empowered to pursue your interests or help your child pursue their interests in STEM. When you leave this webinar, you'll be invited to answer 3 short questions about your experience tonight. And please take a few minutes to share your feedback. We would really enjoy it. For more information about MDA, please visit www.mda.org, contact our resource center, or follow us on social media. Again, I would like to thank everybody who came here. Thank you, panelists, and have a great night.